Yeah, my name is Sean Peasley. I'm a partner in our cyber risk practice of Deloitte, and I lead our IoT security practice for both the US and global.
So IoT is a really interesting area because it's a combination of small transactional data, and also a lot of IoT devices have video and audio in them, which is long-run data. How are you kind of approaching that for the marketplace that's out there, since IoT is a pretty general term?
So as we look at IoT, we really look at, from a cyber standpoint, cyber's everywhere. It's in the data. You've got to think about the data that you need to protect. You've got to think about the devices, the servers, the people that we need to look at and protect. And so it's in everything, all parts of our lives, whether it's our personal lives, our business lives. It's in our business to business types of transactions. And as we approach the IoT, we think of it fairly broadly. We think of it in a number of different areas. We look at the industrial IoT. So think of things like factories and smart factories and public utilities and connected oil rigs. So it's fairly broad when you think of industrial IoT. We also think of areas like the connected vehicle. So now we're getting connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, and they're very, very sophisticated. Some of the most sophisticated devices that we have on the planet, upwards of 100 to 200 million lines of code. That's what we think about from a connected vehicle. We look at medical devices, so those medical devices that have embedded systems and software and connectivity, and all the ecosystems that go around with all these products. And then, lastly, another big area is around smart cities, so smart infrastructure, and those are going to be really connecting to the areas of future mobility. So if it's infrastructure communicating with connected vehicles or autonomous vehicles, all of that is how we look at IoT. And you have other things around consumer products, etc. So really, I think from an IoT security standpoint, we are at really the early days of thinking holistically about how do we secure the IoT, from sensors all the way through to communication, going up to the cloud, coming back and maybe physically, some sort of physical decision being made to change maybe the direction that the car is going to move, or some sort of setting in an infusion pump as an example. So we need to really consider cyber and security of all those elements. So we think of an end-to-end, included in everything, kind of aspects of how are we protecting all this. And a couple of key things that we really are, helping our clients with. Thinking about cyber from the outset, as you design, as you research and you design a product or you develop a product, whether it's an infusion pump or a pacemaker, how do you make sure that cyber is developed from the outset, from end to end? And then also, once it's put into consumers' hands or patients' hands, how are we kind of looking at things post-market? Are we considering all the different cyber elements? Are we monitoring what might be happening in that ecosystem? So it's a very complex environment, and really trying to help make sure that you're thinking, we've got cyber everywhere. Are we really doing what's needed to enable the protection mechanisms and the monitoring capabilities, and if something goes wrong, how do we respond timely and appropriately so that we can help minimize any impact? And one of the reasons is the stakes are higher now. In the past, when we thought of enterprise security, it was really, maybe somebody got access to our financial data or our personally identifiable data. Now it's potentially impacts to life and safety. So if you think of an autonomous vehicle and some adversary can get into an environment and change the direction of the car or take over an automated autonomous vehicle, that could actually have an impact to that driver or the passengers in that car. So the stakes are higher. We really do need to think about comprehensive security in that whole ecosystem as we develop those products and as we deploy those products.
So in that space, if you're looking at that full life cycle, a lot of the discussion at this show has been about putting in that protection aspect, putting in that privileged access control, but there isn't a lot of talk about the change management from an operations point of view. If you're putting something into a car, this is a 30-year lifestyle product. It's not a cell phone that you replace every 18 months. If you're putting it into industrial automation, the same thing with the lifestyle for the medical is a lot of that equipment is 10, 15 years, but more importantly, the data has to be available typically 60 to 70 years. So if you're starting with pediatric patients, you can't create an encryption and protection technology that in 15 years they're saying, well, we don't know what vaccinations they got.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point that we have to think of new mechanisms. And some industries, like if you look at connected vehicles, some are already addressing how do I make updates? Do I need to perform a patch? Can I do that through over the air, or what we call OTA? And I think as these products and these ecosystems evolve, we'll have more capabilities to be able to do these things remotely. So you'll be able to update security settings or configuration or make patches if we find security vulnerabilities. And I think we're going to have to continue on that journey, right? The days of having to take a USB to, and the connected vehicle into the dealer and then plug in a USB, we need to go past that to things like OTA type of capabilities. If you look at a connected factory, they're very concerned with things like high availability, whereas they also concerned about confidentiality and integrity, but high availability is paramount for a connected factory. So making sure that you're doing things and you're protecting the environments in a way that does not upset the connectivity or the operations of that environment, because these are the revenue producing aspects of a business. And so really making sure that the protection mechanisms and the things that you apply to that environment are going to be done in a manner that may be different than what we've done in the enterprise days, but really trying to take those things in consideration. So you have to look at the specific IoT environment or ecosystem or the products involved and really make sure that you're applying the controls in a manner that won't upset the operation of those products, if you will.
So with that being said, Deloitte is a solution provider more than a point products provider. And historically, one of the big places that your company could come into play is to help people cross industries on these things or cross departments. As you're talking about factory automation, vehicles, and things like that, that's more operations centric than what used to be IT. So are you needing to bring these operations groups in, teach them to be data aware, have them learn this, and trade context with enterprise? Because they can't really operate autonomously anymore.
No, that's a good question. You do need to think of it differently, and so these operational technologies, they do have different kinds of protocols and methods and processes. And we think of in a factory, we think of the process control network, and so you do need to have people that have the experience in those control systems, if you will, and maybe you need to teach the people that have deep experience in the control systems cybersecurity, and it's probably going to be easier because they're going to typically be engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, not necessarily just computer science or IS type of folks that we have on the IT and the enterprise area. So really having those kind of people and making sure that they understand the operational priorities, again, high availability, and then how do we incorporate security or cyber into those environments. These environments have been around for 40, 50, 60 years, and then you also have to ask what's the mechanism and method that we can actually do this. If it's not a greenfield build of a new plant, you have to do things to maybe overlay some solutions, and it's going to be a combination of technology, process, people, training as part of that overall environment, really to give them the capabilities so that they can be comfortable and confident that they're managing their cyber risk. And the technologies, it's going to be a number of different. These are always heterogeneous environments, many different types of solution vendors, and trying to ensure that you're improving their security while maintaining that high availability high availability is going to be key.
Now, kind of a combination question, but you'll get kind of the direction I'm going. When you look at this operational side and these process control people, their hierarchy for privileged access is very operations oriented. This person designs the process, this one can run the machine, all these things in place. That's different from the privileged access in IT for how the data is flowing on the other side of it. Or are you seeing there's not a 100% match on authority on both sides? So what happens is you now have to train somewhat complex things to those groups. So by doing that, this is a pretty big show. I've been coming for 20 plus years, but it's a tough subject to step into new. Do you help bring them to that education level to be able to understand what needs to be done, to be able to make the trade-off decisions, or is that something you work with the IT guys primarily to manage?
So I've also been coming for over 20 years. It's a great show. It's expanded a lot, and I think it's really helping the better of the community and society overall. And I think if you look at those environments, as you mentioned, the privileged access that somebody in maybe a plant or on an oil rig might have is critical for them to be able to operate that environment. However, that also provides some risk. So as if somebody can get into the environment or into the network, you do need to make sure that they have the ability to contain what a adversary might be able to do. So you have to somehow control those privileged access, similar to what we've done in the IT environments, but actually fit for an OT environment, an operational technology environment. So you do need to think about that. But a lot of it really starts with some of basics, right? A lot of security training and appreciation and change the culture and things of that nature is going to be as critical as implementing these sophisticated technology solutions. So you do need to think about the people element and really making sure they understand how to improve the risk posture, how to secure the environments, how to find if something might be an anomalous item in the environment, and then maybe having other tools like, can I monitor for that environment? So are you able to monitor if something potentially is a security event? How do you make sure that you can identify that quickly? You can understand the potential impact that might have. Can you eradicate that? Can you recover if something bad happens? All those really have to ultimately be incorporated into the environment to get a good, strong comfort that we're managing our cyber risk.